Howdy. Welcome back to Dion Talk.
In this video, what we're going to do is cover a concept that I see in the comments often in Facebook. Recently, I retired. A lot of people told me, don't do it because you have a lot of debt. Currently, I have $1.8 million in debt. So I brought my friend in here, Cody Davis, who is killing it in the real estate world. And I wanted to ask Cody, do you think that debt can make you wealthy?
Yes, I do.
Okay, that's good. It was a nice short video. Thanks for taking an hour drive out here to hang out and answer that question for me.
Yeah, great video.
Yeah, right. It really is that simple. Can debt make you wealthy? When you go to retire, which you're probably a few more years away from that than I was, how much debt would you like to have?
More than I'm at today. Today, I owe about $7.6 million on a $12 million real estate portfolio.
That's the thing that I think people struggle with. When you say something like, I have $1.8 million in debt or $7 million in debt, right?
Yeah.
They think, I would never want that. I wish I had more.
I do too. I mean, I'd love to put a zero on both of those numbers.
Because it's the scale. What's the cash flow that it's generated by that debt? Does it cover the debt service? Is the cash flow worth the investment? Not, do I own an investment? That's what I think a lot of people are looking for. They're looking for, I don't owe anybody any money. I don't care how much money I owe somebody, as long as the asset is generating more than it costs to have the asset and cover the debt service. So I retired with $1.8 million in debt on a little over $5 million portfolio.
That's awesome.
So if some people say you can't retire with debt, they're not looking at what is the net worth, which to me is a fictitious number that almost means nothing, because cash flow is what determines whether you're financially free or not your net worth.
Yeah, you could have $1 million in land and someone else has 500,000 in a fourplex and they'd be doing better.
Right.
So
because the fourplex
makes money.
Right. Explain, if you could take a minute and explain to people, how has debt made you more money?
Yeah. So I like to look at it as just debt being an instrument similar to the dollar. If you look at the dollar bill, it says it's a note, and a note is a debt instrument. I use promissory notes to buy real estate when I borrow money. So if you know that the dollar bill is a note, why wouldn't you use another note that's just for a bigger amount? The dollar bill in the US caps at 100. When you need something bigger than that, you can have other notes like promissory notes to go buy real estate. And I got started at 19 years old with no money. So the options were figure out how to earn a lot of money or figure out how to borrow a lot of money. And it seemed easier to me to figure out how to borrow the money than to just go out and earn it. Because if I went and bought my first deal back then, it was $1.1 million when I bought it zero money down, seller financed a majority, borrowed the down payment as a hard money loan, very expensive. If I tried to buy it again today, it'd be $1.6 million. And I wouldn't have earned the $1.1 million in the last few years just trying to sell real estate. That would have been very hard to do because I had no connections in the real estate space, no family in the business, and no family money to borrow from. So my thought was, okay, I just go out, borrow a bunch of money, and the quickest way and easiest way to become a millionaire is to borrow money and let someone else pay it off. Well, the problem with that is, okay, how do I borrow money and let someone else pay it off? Cash flowing real estate. And it comes down to ratios. You've got a loan to value under 40%. It's phenomenal. My loan to value right now is just south of 60%. And that's come from buying real estate, getting the rents up, getting the values up. And I don't have to take rents above market. Market rent may be $1,000. I'm at $800 to $900. Provide a great place for people to live at a great price, and they stay happy. But I make sure that my ratios work. So when I'm going out and borrowing seller finance loans, I get to write those deals where they cash flow. And there's a thing called a DSCR. You're looking at your debt service coverage ratio. I don't know if you talked about this on the channel.
I've had Convoy Home Loans on that actually does DSCR, 30-year or 40-year fixed rate debt on up to 8 units. So it's actually something I've looked at on the few that I've looked at that were more than 4 units per property.
That's awesome. And so your DSCR, it's just a ratio to say, okay, if you want a 1.3 ratio, if your debt costs $100,000, the property needs to net with net operating income $130,000, and you have this spread. And the higher your ratio is, the more cash flow you have. And so if your ratio was 1x, it means if your debt costs 100,000, the net operating income is 100,000 and you have no cash flow. Not a great place to be. Today, a lot of my DSCRs are above 2 to 2.5 because I structured seller finance notes with really low interest rates on long-term debt. And that allows me to cash flow a ton, even though I'm borrowing a lot. And it gives me enough cash flow to where I can keep buying more real estate and increasing my debt, increasing my equity, and most importantly, increasing my cash flow.
A lot of people just look at the debt and they think that's a scary number because if your tenants aren't paying, it's a number you end up having to pay. And if you had one tenant paying all of that, yes, it would be scary, but you diversify by having multiple different tenants. I like to have multiple different tenant types. So I do about 1/3 military, 1/3 Section 8, 1/3 working and retired, different sections of the market. And then I keep my properties spread out. So you have over 100 units. They're not all in one spot, pulling all of your tenants from one place. They're spread out next to different economic drivers.
Yep.
If you're in the space of all debt is bad, Cody talked about how long it would take to save up the money to buy the property. Think of how long it takes to save up the down payment. And while you're saving, appreciation is happening. So the value of the properties is going up. You would be chasing that number. If I purchased all cash, I would probably have one duplex if I was able to save that amount of money in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Instead, I have 16 rental units that generated enough cash flow for me to be able to quit work and never need to work again in my life because I use debt. Because there's a few things happening. You talked about my second most favorite thing about debt. Someone else pays it off. Your tenants pay off the mortgage. I would do 1,000-year mortgages because I don't care about the property being paid off. I care about the cash flow. Also think about this. If you save the money and buy a property and it appreciates, you're only going to gain appreciation on how much you invested if you paid all cash, instead of paying 20 or 25% down and then gaining 4 or 5 times the amount of appreciation because the bank doesn't get the appreciation. They don't care that it even exists. That's yours. So yes, the answer of this question right off the bat in 10 seconds was debt can make you wealthy. Debt can make work optional, which was my goal. Debt can build a massive rental portfolio that becomes a machine that feeds itself, creates jobs, and provides housing for a lot of people at beautifully less than area average rent because you're able to use debt wisely. And there's an age component too. When I was building my portfolio, my goal was 70% loan to value. I wanted to be gaining as much appreciation as possible. I wanted to have an equity position to be able to handle something like a rent decrease, where I'm not sure if you know this or not, but since we started tracking the data in 1914, there has never been one 5-year period where rents went down market-wide, not once. There are some areas where, like in Detroit, the car manufacturers move away, or the dot-com bubble bursting hits Silicon Valley more than everywhere else. So there are some local areas where rents went down, but market-wide, rents have never decreased. But we invest, both of us, like we're planning for rents to go down and be able to survive it. So having a 60% LTV is great. I think at your age, I would be a little even more aggressive than you are.
Well, and I take some principles from Dion. I'm not necessarily trying to pull out a ton of money from the portfolio. If I want to add leverage, I know how to go buy 90% seller financed. So I can add a ton of leverage that way just from going out without any bank loans. I'll pull a little bit of money out on refinances for liquidity purposes, but I'm not borrowing just to borrow, because debt can be a two-edged sword. If you just go out and borrow money on a whole bunch of assets that barely squeak by, maybe the margin on the DSCR is 1.1, you're not making a ton of money. Now you're going to get pinched. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because if there's a contraction, I can lower a lot of my rents by 40%, which has never happened before. But I could do that and be fine. And all of my apartments would stay full forever because nobody could get a better deal elsewhere. A ton of people are leveraging up right now really big. I'm not talking about the number behind their debt stack. I'm not saying 100 million is a bad thing. I'm saying if you're leveraging up too high on your real estate, it can put you in a pinch. It's really easy to over leverage. And by over leverage, I mean you're shrinking your cash flow on shorter term debt.
Now, what I really like is if you have that 40% LTV when you hit retirement age, or that 60% while you're in growth phase, we both still sleep like babies. If you take a page out of the 2008 housing crash, there were several elements that added up to the crash happening. The first was we were over 50% adjustable rate mortgages. Last year, we were at 3%. This year, we've ticked up to 11%. So that's not good news, but it's not 50%. More importantly, we don't have ninja loans. So no income, no job, no assets. That was something that was big in 06 and 07 that doesn't exist as much now. We also had people borrowing 105% of the value of their property. They would wrap the closing costs up into the loan to be able to borrow it. That can create problems. So yes, debt can make you wealthy. Debt can make work optional, but use it wisely and keep a good loan to value ratio. At retirement, 40%, I'm very comfortable with it. I might even go up a little, finally use my VA loan on the next property and buy it with no cash. That one property would be more leveraged, but as an overall portfolio, I would still be under 50% LTV. And in growth phase, 60% is very conservative. And I think I have confidence in your ability to grow the way you are. If that's your LTV, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a priority for me to make sure that I have room, which really matters when you're doing this. But at the end of the day, there's no hard and set rules, because if you could buy $1 million property, they said, look, I'm going to sell or finance it to you, 0 money down. We're going to do a 50-year amortized loan, and I'm going to sell it to you for $2 million, but it's going to cash flow $4,000 a month. The way I looked at that is, okay, if it's going to pay itself down, meaning it's amortized, it's going to cost me 0 money out of pocket, and it's going to add $4,000 a month in cash flow to my existence, I'd probably do that deal. I'd be 200% loan to value, but my tenants are going to pay it off over the long term. I have no balloons. It'll just pay itself off, and it's going to add 50 grand a year in cash flow to my existence on today's numbers. Now, that's an exception to the rule. We're talking about loan to value. So there's always going to be a way around that, but it comes down to, can you get long-term fixed rate debt? And do you have the margin and the cash flow to where you're not just squeaking by with $100 a month on a little house in the Midwest, but you actually have, okay, I've got money that comes in, I can put some money into a reserve account, and I'm going to have that margin on long-term debt to where no matter how much I borrow, I am safe.
And to the people who reached out to me when I said I was looking at retiring, and they said, don't retire while you have debt. I guess I'll go back to work and earn enough money to pay that debt off.
But not today.
Not today.
Not today.
Thanks a lot, Cody, for taking the drive and actually coming out here and hanging out in my studio. If people want to reach out with questions, how can they find you?
If you Google Cody Davis Real Estate on YouTube, or you look up Cody and Christian Multifamily Strategy, check out our YouTube channel. And if you want to give us a quick call directly, we have a video on how to find any property owner anywhere. And you can find anybody's phone number. Our phone numbers are in that video. So check it out.
Awesome. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
I'll probably edit that.
I paused, so I haven't changed looking directions.
Okay. Wow, you've edited some videos before. Thanks.